what I've been tasked with is, before we kick you guys out, to go have some of these exploration conversations, which I think will be, 1,000 different conversations about those 1,000 flowers blooming, or those thousands of crystals growing. I want to tell you about one of them, which is just in my little slice of earth and life. And I want to do it by telling you 3 stories, none of which is actually about AI, but all of which are kind of, in the end, a little bit about AI. Most of you who know me know that I'm from the South. My family's from the South. And one of the things that means is that everyone in my family tree was a farmer. My father, in fact, was a chemical engineer. He was the son of an engine mechanic who'd served in the Navy. And his father was a cotton farmer. And his father was a cotton farmer. And his father fought at the Battle of Chickamauga, and his gun exploded in his face, and he went back home and became a one-eyed cotton farmer. And his father was a cotton farmer, and actually it goes back about 4 or 5 generations, even back here to Tennessee, before they made their way to Texas. And one of the things that occurred to me was that I am the first generation in my family not to make anything. My father was an engineer. He made chemicals, he made plants, he made factories. His father made cars, worked on engines. The rest of them made food. They made things for their community. They built houses. I have moved money around my entire career. I started as a banker, I moved to private equity, I then became an asset allocator, then I worked with families, then I worked with institutions as a money manager. And there's never been a point in my life where I could actually say, other than when I was in junior high and high school making music, that I actually made anything. And so when Ben and I were leaving the last company that we were working for there in Houston and decided to start our own thing, one of the really important things that I wanted to do is change that. I was finding something that I think my fathers and their fathers didn't realize, when they probably would have been happy to hear that I was living a life in which I could choose to do whatever I wanted, in which I didn't have to labor as much as they had. They probably didn't realize how alienating it can be to not see the results of your labor, how separate you can be from having made something, and how much we as a species were made to make things, to protect things, and to teach things. And so I think that realization, when we were starting the company, we wanted Second Foundation Partners in Epsilon Theory to be a creative outlet for both of us. We wanted to make beautiful things, whether that was through writing or through the other creative outlets that we have. But I wanted to do it in my non-commercial life as well. And so my wife and I got together and we said, we want to make things. And so we set out to do a few very specific things that we wanted to make. We knew we wanted to have a farm. That's my wife on the upper left with one of the Buff Orpington chickens, which are all named after 1980s and 90s country music stars. I believe that's Dolly. That's me and my son in the middle planting a cider orchard, and then that's that same son a few years later in a wind tunnel, because we decided we wanted a homeschool as well. And in each of these cases, these were decisions before Ben had even coined the idea of making, protecting, and teaching, that we wanted to make, protect, and teach. We wanted to do something tangible. And on the surface, none of this has anything to do with AI, except that when it came to farming, cider orcharding, and homeschooling, we didn't have any idea what the hell we were doing. It was a problem. And for the conversations we're going to have today, I want to realize something important, which is that not everyone here lives on a farm, or wants to. Not everyone wants to make cider. I'm guessing a lot of you don't like it, and I'm guessing a lot of you have never even had a hard cider. I'm guessing a lot of you probably don't homeschool. Most of you, some of you may even be opposed to it. That isn't what practical AI is about. It's what it's going to be about for me, and I'm going to talk to you guys about it for just a minute. But what I mean here is that I think when we think about the role and with this what AI is going to do to society, to humanity, there's an instinct to think that it's going to do those very things that I was worried about, right? That it is going to accelerate and increase our alienation, that it's going to make us more distant from the works of our labor, that it's going to depersonalize us rather than put us in a position of having better, close personal relationships with people. And I think what I mean by practical AI, and what I think Ben and the others who can see this idea are thinking of when they think practical AI, is how do we turn that on its head? How do we use artificial intelligence, and in particular Gen AI, as tools to reduce alienation, to increase the intentionality of our relationships rather than increasing the distance between us, to become tools for making, protecting, and teaching rather than becoming oppositions to each of those things? And I think that AI and Gen AI are perfectly suited for this task. And one of the reasons why I think that is because the way that this technology works is what its superpower is through drawing connections, creating connections. And it's creating connections between things which are not always immediately obvious, or which may be outside of our native capacity to identify. What I mean is connections between things like the resources we have, the things that are sitting around us and the ways that they can be used. Connections between friends we have, interests, values, our favorite books, films, things in history which may have happened, our favorite foods. Connections between big ideas that we had or that we think we heard or that we read somewhere, the moods we're in. Numbers we have stored in a spreadsheet or series of spreadsheets, or in an expensive spreadsheet we call Salesforce, or fleeting notions we had at some point. All of these things are things that we can connect, and AI is a really good tool for it. So how did we do that with the two remaining stories on our farm? Well, we started by buying a property from the mid-18th century, which had been used as a cider orchard for about 150 years until it got ripped up in Prohibition. And we saw immediately that we wanted to protect the legacy of this place. And this was a great place for us to start by planting this orchard to make hard ciders. And so we set about, after we moved into the property, to plant 80 plus apple trees. We built a whole high tension trellis system from 50 different varieties native to different regions. So apples from Normandy in France, from Somerset in England, from Asturias in Spain, and heirloom varieties from the United States. And again, I need to remind you, we had no idea what the hell we were doing. But we had a lot of ideas, right? We wanted to make cider that wasn't terrible. We wanted to make cider that was stylistically appropriate, balanced, ones that reflected our personality, what we liked, what we didn't like, ones that would lend themselves to distillation and turning into brandy. Frankly, I wanted to make a distillation vessel with my father, who likes working with his hands, and I thought it'd be fun to bang on copper and get some welding equipment out. We wanted a range of ciders with different flavor profiles. We wanted to integrate different traditions. And we wanted to evoke the colonial heritage of the property. We wanted to protect what was there. And frankly, more than anything, we wanted our kids to be a part of this, for them to be able to learn biology in the setting of management of soil, to be able to learn about chemistry and talking about how the apples are actually forming on the tree, to be able to talk about nature and the environment and evolution and all sorts of ideas that are going to be part of their curricula. But we still didn't really know how to make cider. But what LLMs are really good at, and what Gen AI is really good at, is taking the same kind of information that we all know how to provide to people who don't have the right inputs, right? Whenever we're working with a new employee, for those of you who work with people and have people who work for you, whenever you work with a new student, if you're someone who's a teacher, whenever you're teaching your children a new concept, we have an intuition for the right kinds of information to provide, the right kind of questions to ask. What do we know already? What are the resources and the information that we already have? What are the things we care about? What is it that we like? What don't we like? What's interesting to us? What are the non-negotiables, the must-haves and the must-not-haves that play into it? It is astoundingly simple, the prompts that I was able to provide to a pretty standard generative AI tool to produce a range of full agendas and itineraries for the management of an orchard and the creation of individual ciders that merged all of these ideas and all of these inputs without any special kind of expertise. Now, of course, since we went through this project, Ben and I have invested a lot of time in incorporating some of this into the way we analyze narrative and the work we're doing. But all the work that we did to produce some of these early blends and formulas for our cider orchard came when we were just playing around with GPT-4. And the level of creativity and innovation that was unlocked by using some of these tools was, again, kind of astounding. So just giving it some of those things that we want. One of the ideas that GPT came back with was, look, You're in New England. You live on a colonial property that's near the town of Fairfield. Fairfield was burned down relatively early in the war, so you probably want to evoke a few of those ideas. Let's start with a series that goes from the battles of Lexington and Concord. And it starts to introduce and use the actual apples from my orchard, has access to, not from a spreadsheet, from its training data, the levels of different tannins, the levels of malic acid that's present in the apples, the level of sugars in the ranges and different latitudes that would be present for those apples to actually identify, based on the parameters I gave, this is a mix of apples that would provide the juice and the cider that you want with the right alcohol level, with the right astringency, the right bitterness. And also, here's some cool ideas. So why don't you make Redfield the biggest contributor? It'll make it a rosé cider, which will be indicative of this being the first blood drawn in the Revolutionary War. Then let's make sure you include blue pearmain, which is the only American apple that has a blue skin to represent the uniforms of the Continental Army. But we need to have Hertfordshire red streak apples, which is an English apple from Somerset, which has a distinctive red flesh and also happens to be the county in England from which the leader of the redcoats at the Battle of Lexington and Concord was from. He was from Hertfordshire. And so you go through each of these examples. Oh, by the way, Yarlington Mill was one of the favorite apples of the General Cornwallis. Ashmead's Kernel was one of the first apples imported from the United Kingdom to the Americas whenever they came over with the colonists. The dimensionality to the connections that, if I were an expert, I would have been able to draw was astounding to us, and frankly, produced a really good output. So we were excited by some of these results and decided not just to apply it to making or protecting, but to teaching. So we homeschool, as I mentioned, we have similar problems with a lot of goals. We have a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 3-year-old. The 9-year-old and 8-year-old we kind of run in class together. The 3-year-old's a little bit tougher. But we have the same goals anyone else does. We wanted to provide good, direct instruction. We have values where we want to emphasize creative time, independent study over direct instruction. We have a certain number of texts and resources in our library at home. We want to be able to use those, but know when we should use new ones. We're really focused on finding multidisciplinary ways of learning. How do we tackle topics in multiple different ways? And we want our kids to see the actual relationships between ideas, cultures, and subjects. And then we want to be able to plan out the actual days. What are the lesson plans look like? What are some places where we have flexibility? And again, the information that we have to provide, the prompts that we were starting with when we started doing this about 1.5 years ago, were extremely limited. And I'm not going to walk through these prompts, but I will be at the Practical AI desk. For anyone who wants to do stuff like this, there's going to be tons of other people who have similar scripting ideas. So if you really do want to think about how to do this, we'll be there. I'm not going to talk about that now. But what I'll say is, providing it with a list of the books that we have, our family values, what are the events that exist within our schedule? What are our priorities? What is the subject scaffolding we'd like to approach over the course of the year? What are our kids' strengths? What are their interests? What are things that they're really into right now? What are the results from the prior lessons, skills we want to build? The level of multidisciplinary connections between topics that these tools can provide to someone who's putting together a lesson plan is incredible, right? And this is kind of what I'm talking about, and what I think Ben was talking about, is that there are ways to decrease alienation. There are ways to increase the intentionality of what we're doing, to intensify each of those making, protecting, and teaching functions that I think make us human. And so for us, this was never about outsourcing or reducing labor. I want to be very clear. Since we have incorporated these tools into both our cider making, our farming, and our teaching, we're spending twice as much time in preparation. I'm not saying we couldn't use it as a labor saver, as a time saver, but what it has done has spurred us into, we need to read this book, we need to think about this, we need to try this new idea. We didn't even know that museum was there. These new ideas, we end up spending twice as much time investing in both these making and protecting activities of cider making and homeschooling. So for us, this has been a prod to more humanity rather than one to less. But again, not everyone homeschools, not everyone will make cider, but I think you can think right now about the things in your life which benefit from connection, which would benefit from reducing alienation, which would benefit from becoming more human in this age of AI. So again, as Ben reiterated, we're going to have all sorts of exploration times, desks to go to. Throughout the weekend, I'm going to be spending a lot of time over at that desk with my colleagues Chris Watley and Brian Parker, I don't see right now. But we're going to be there, but I know there's going to be a lot of other people there too. I hope to see you there. I hope to see you talking to Matt and Jack and everyone else who's going to be walking around. But otherwise, I think we're ready for a break. Is that right, Ben?
That's right.
All right. Thanks, guys.